It's a subject so important that we had to cover it twice. Cybersecurity. Building off of our first episode on cyber, StateScoop's again teamed with RSA to bring thought leaders in the state information technology community together around this topic and to learn more about what it means for state IT shops across the country. And it couldn't be a more prominent time. Next month, October, will be Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and folks from the White House, the Department of Homeland Security, and beyond will be coordinating activities to talk about what cybersecurity means all across all sectors. Our focus today comes just weeks after the White House hired its first ever federal Chief Information Security Officer, underscoring the importance of this field. So join us today for the first time live on video as we discuss cybersecurity. This is Priorities, coming to you today from the annual conference of the National Association of State Chief Information Officers in Orlando, Florida. Today on our 9th episode, we'll be talking about cybersecurity again. On our last cyber podcast, we talked about the basics of cybersecurity operations in Florida and Virginia. We also covered where states are seeing the biggest threats and what technology they're using to mitigate those threats. On today's episode, we'll bring together leaders from Maryland, Michigan, and the private sector to talk about some specifics on these issues. Joining us today, we have David Garcia. He's Maryland's State Chief Information Officer, and Governor Larry Hogan's Secretary for Information Technology. David, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Paul Groll. He's the Deputy Chief Security Officer for the state of Michigan. Thanks so much for joining us on Priorities.
Thanks.
And finally, we have Jackie Wynn, a Priorities veteran. Jackie is the Vice President of RSA Global Public Sector. Jackie, thanks for being with us on Priorities
Great,
today.
thank you.
I also want to take a second to thank the good folks at RSA for sponsoring today's episode of Priorities. And with that, let's jump into the questions. Since we've got a new panel of state IT officials on today's episode, I wanted to go to each of you and see if you can give me a quick overview of what your state's cyber operation looks like. And we'll start with you, David.
Thanks, Jake. So coming into state government about a year and a half ago, Maryland was a very siloed, federated model for IT services, and the governor's initiatives when coming into the state was to take a more enterprise approach to IT within the state. So we took a look at cyber along with all the other activities, and what we found was each individual agency put a different emphasis on cyber. So now that we're a year and a half into this enterprise effort, we have a much more robust view of what we're looking at now. We're putting standards in place, we're putting policies in place, we're taking a look at firewalls. Our emphasis has moved past just a broad education to the individuals, not that there's a de-emphasis that should be placed on it. That's probably where we see our biggest bang for the buck, is in educating our users.
Also governance, probably too.
Yes. So being that we're in an enterprise now, we have much more direct focus, direct hands-on. We have a much more centralized approach to things like antivirus, which when coming into the state, we had every flavor and every manufacturer, and it was really hard to track anything. So I think moving forward, you'll see that Maryland has a much more comprehensive and much more laser-focused approach to cyber.
That's great. And Paul, what are you seeing in Michigan?
In Michigan, we're lucky that we've been consolidated for a long time. We've had a single IT department for 15 years now. And so I won't kid you, the first few years were no fun and games. There was a lot of pushback, and it was difficult to align things from a number of the cabinet agencies. But we've got one consolidated cyber team. We have a SOC that runs operations 8 to 5 and then outsource monitoring the rest of the day. We have a team of liaisons who work one-on-one with our agency services teams, software development projects, and everything from business analysis to bringing new projects into the fold and following our NIST-based policy base. We're doing a major rewrite of the policy base over the past year or so to bring everything up to speed with the current version of NIST and to make everything easier to read, and also all of our policy documents are going to be ADA compliant. The focus within cyber has been on customer service and delivery with more of an emphasis on gathering data about what's going on across our network. So I can go into that in more detail.
Sure, sure. So Jackie, I want to turn to you here. I mean, from RSA, what are you seeing across the country, and what are some of these key trends that you're seeing states deal with?
Thanks, Jake. I would say we kind of talked about it at NASIO today, right? And I think we've heard it from both of these cyber professionals that we've got to get to a common language of how we talk about business risk, and then how we talk about what the security tools are. And I think Agnes Kirk from Washington said it today. Well, you've got cost, you've got risk, and then you've got your brand. And I think that at RSA we call it kind of a gap of grief, because you've got to get funding from your legislator, but you've got to talk in terms of business risk, right? What does that mean? What's your risk management profile? And then you've got, what happens when you do have a breach, right? What information are they trying to get? So there's this whole kind of how do you create this common language around what that risk profile, and it isn't talking about endpoint solutions or different solutions. It's the risk to your citizenship, your risk to your business, your risk to your operations.
It's a fascinating point. And so since we are at NASIO's annual conference, and just earlier today, this 2016 cybersecurity survey was released. But earlier this year, NASIO put out a call to states and said, hey, you guys, should really be embracing cyber analytics, and here's, some tips on how to do that. I'd love to hear from each of you, and Paul, let's start with you, about what your state is doing with cyber analytics and what you're seeing from those results.
Sure, we are somewhere down the path of implementing IBM's QRadar product to have a consolidated collection from all of our network and security device sensors to congregate all that data in one place for immediate correlation analysis, and so that we can respond quicker to things that are happening right away. One of the main focuses for me personally in the next probably 1 to 3 years is going to be to layer on top of that some sort of advanced analytics, whether it's within the QRadar product itself or a companion product that we don't know yet, to do some deeper analytics on what I call the slower attacks, the events where we've got advanced actors in our network sitting waiting for months or whatever. We want to be able to drill down into the advanced analytics and find those indicators of compromise so that we can go after those.
And David, in Maryland, I mean, are you guys working with cyber analytics? And if you are, what's the plan? What are you seeing there?
So we're just getting there now. We're just taking a deeper dive into this as we, again, take our enterprise approach to things. We're putting people behind our next-gen firewalls, taking a deeper look at some of the logs that are being generated. And we're getting some interesting reporting coming out of that now. But I think moving forward, we're going to probably look at things a little broader and a little more comprehensive in nature.
Interesting. And Jackie, not only what are you guys doing at RSA with analytics, but also what are you seeing across the states as they start to move toward cyber analytics?
Right. Well, I think we all agree it's not, you just can't have a cyber approach that's just perimeter based only, right? SIM tools aren't going to solve everything. So the opportunity to look at analytics and looking at it from, if they are in your network, to your point, what information are they trying to get, how long they've been there, but also it's the behavior analytics. So, the example is like you have a car driving down, a highway. Well, why did they get off on this exit versus another exit? Or what are they carrying in their trunk, right? So all these different type of analytics that help you understand what's really going on with the information and more importantly, what they are doing with that information. And coupled with that is the whole, I think, we've got to think about is your whole authentication, right? How do you authenticate who and what you're getting that information on, that analytics on, so you can make some informed decisions.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I want to turn, just switching gears just a little bit, I want to turn to ransomware. I mean, StateScoop's been of state and local, county, city, whatever, IT officials. And the common thread that we've seen at every single one of those conferences is that people are saying that ransomware is the biggest threat that is facing communities today. And so I wanted to talk to you about what you guys are seeing in your states. So, David, are you seeing ransomware kind of really having a giant uptick? And how are you guys trying to fight that threat, and what are you doing to mitigate it?
So yeah, great question, Jake. Definitely seeing an uptick. I think, as we all know, ransomware is kind of like the next gen of things. With ransomware as a service, I mean, is particularly troubling. I mean, you can literally hire people to go out and do these attacks. For us, I think it still goes back to that user education. We have to educate users on what to look for, because that's really our best defense. When we get into a remediation effort, it's usually just backups and restoring. I mean, there's not a lot. I mean, it puts a lot of strain and a lot of effort on the IT shop, having to do these things and kind of back your way out of these situations. But yeah, I do see this as being more and more troubling.
Yeah.
And they also want to get paid in bitcoins, and you can't even find them.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's another, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and Jackie, I mean, you and I have talked about this
Right.
before. We've talked about ransomware. I mean, I know that I'm sure you guys are tracking ransomware intensely at RSA, but how are you seeing states fight it, and how are you guys kind of getting into that fight and helping them out?
Yeah, great question. I think from a ransomware perspective, right, it's like these threat actors, to your point, I mean, it's just accelerating very quickly right now, right? So it's across healthcare. I mean, every day you're hearing something, and some of the thing that's troubling is not everybody wants to even report when they've been victimized. So that's the other silent code. But I would say that where we've tried to tackle this quickly is with some of our, if you look at the network architecture and you look at what your data protection suite is, so how well are you backing up your data, right? So that way you can kind of isolate and create kind of an air gap in terms of what they're taking and what is missing. So we do have something, I think, just around your whole network architecture component around just your data protection, and what you're doing for backup is pretty important.
And yeah, I mean, backup ends up
Right.
being that key.
Key,
And that's
right.
everybody says it. Every vendor, every state, every MSISAC official says, your best defense is that backup. And Paul, the same question to you. What are you guys seeing in Michigan with ransomware?
Yeah, the best line I've heard about ransomware is that it's not an attack; it's a business model, which means
Very true.
Which means
That's
it's
very
not going to
true.
go
Yep.
away. It's really
That's right.
not going to go away. It's just going to get worse. It's mutating faster than just about any kind of malware ever has. We've had a few isolated hits here and there. Luckily, they've been areas where we had backups and could restore, just wipe, the workstations and start fresh and go forward. But user awareness, most of the stuff we've seen comes in as phishing. So we've worked with a number of our tool vendors to, lock down as much as we can and prevent that from coming in the front door in the first place. But getting the users up to speed on what a threatening email looks like, and keeping browsers patched up, because some of the browser drive-by delivery of that malware are becoming more popular too.
But we even did worked with a systems integrator, and they did an interesting exercise where they dropped a bunch of USBs in a parking lot, and they wanted to see how many people would take those USBs.
Right.
Plug them back in, and the number was incredibly high. I'm sure it was like make your hair go gray. That these guys would actually take these USBs and plug them in. So it's not even the email phishing, but even USB ports. So it's all about that whole user education. I think is very, very, very important to emphasize.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to ingress.
Yes.
That's something right out of Mr.
Right.
Robot. That's right on TV.
Yeah.
And actually, if there was any doubt at all about how pervasive ransomware has become, I was in my Uber ride here from the airport. The driver and I were talking. He's like, "What do you cover?" I said, "Well, information technology." He says, "Oh, my wife got hit with ransomware the other day," and so it's even affecting, just the general citizen who might have no idea, what to do, and probably almost definitely doesn't have a backup.
Sure.
So that shows how crazy that can be.
One of the scariest things lately is that they seem to be moving more to a targeted model, where they're identifying rich targets in advance and going after them, and the amount of money they're asking for the keys is varying a lot too, from 20 euros for some places in Europe to tens of thousands of dollars in the U.S. for businesses.
Right. But as business executives, think about maybe sometimes you want to work at home or you work on your own personal network, right? How is that backed up as well, right? So that's another key issue as well, I think, that we got to think about.
Well, we could talk about ransomware all day, but the last question for you guys today, and I, talking to Paul about this earlier, so this is a tough one, so I hope we did well. So let's start with you, David. What's one thing that states need to be thinking about right now when it comes to increasing their cyber posture?
Well, that's a great question. One thing, I think, well, for the state of Maryland, it's really about how are you looking at your network in totality? Are you looking at it across the spectrum? I think it's easy to go to the technology piece. It's easy to go to the antivirus or your firewalls and say, okay, we're good. But all of these things need to be a cohesive effort. You got to look at it in a global type environment. And I think there's a lot of great state CIOs, but I think it's easy to focus on there or get involved with a vendor and you think that you've got this covered, but it really takes that big view from the top. I think Michigan has done an exceptionally good job at that. I mean, they've really brought in everybody from the Guard and their partners. I mean, I attended their cyber event last year, and David Behan's done a remarkable job. And again, I think this was driven from the top, from the governor's office, and they've done an amazing job with taking that comprehensive. And then a lot of the states, they look to Michigan as a model.
That's a great segue to Paul.
There you go.
What's your
Well, we all preach people, process, technology, and we've talked up here today about the importance of advanced analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And over the past several months, there have been a number of articles and lectures that have come out that talk about the fact that by 2020, 2021, there's going to be a global shortage of about 2.3 million positions in IT security and data science combined. And so right now, I would say the best thing you could do is grow your workforce, find ways to get at programs that engage people at a very young age and grow that workforce that's going to hang around in your state and become your workers in 5, 10, 15 years, because the percentage of government employees that are eligible to retire in the next 5 years
silver tsunami
is scary.
Right.
Like 40% and up. From a lot of agencies. So growing that workforce, getting people trained and in position to take over those positions in the next 5 to 10 years, I think it would be a tremendous leg up.
Yeah, workforce, that's episode 7 of priorities. Jackie, you get the last word here. I mean, what's your number one tip for states?
I have 2 tips. Can I do 2
Okay,
tips?
you can do
Okay,
2.
2 tips. One is I definitely agree with the workforce. And at RSA, we do have a really strong education program. So both of your states have done really well. So we're working with Michigan State, and we're also working with University of Maryland College Park and University College on their whole cyber curriculum, but also looking at veterans, right? So when the veterans come back in the workforce, because they're already got clearances, right? They already understand kind of what a commitment is. They believe in the mission. So we're also working with veterans, and both your schools have done a great job, and they're going to be highlighted at our conference in San Francisco. So that's a big point for us. And the other one is also looking at programs like Cyber Scholars, where you can go to the university and your first 2 years are paid for, right? But you've got to give back some kind of way. You either got to go to the federal government or you've got to go in some nonprofit or state. Sure. So those are the type of programs, to your point, to attract and retain. Yeah. The other piece, though, is around this whole NIST, right? I think that's a great tool to think about. How do you operationalize the process? And I think Michigan has done a great job. Maryland's doing a great job. It's more than just checking the box, right? It's like, how do I really operationalize and put some processes in place so I understand the 3 R's? And the 3 R's aren't like reading, writing, arithmetic, right? They're like readiness, their response, and resilience. So it's those 3 R's I think we've all got to think about when we think about what our security posture is.
Mm-hmm. I think it's worth underscoring, too, the university angle.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a blossoming of cyber assurance programs in universities that just has not been there for the past decade or so. They're just popping up all over the place, and that's very encouraging.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your input and for the great thoughts on cybersecurity. I know that I'm feeling a little more confident about state cybersecurity after talking to you guys, so thank you for that.
The Big Ten.
Yeah, the Big Ten.
The Big
That's right.
Ten. You bet.
Thanks again to Maryland CIO David Garcia, Michigan's Paul Groll, and RSA's Jackie Wynn for joining us today on Priorities to talk more about cybersecurity. Episodes of Priorities are posted monthly, so be sure to check back on StateScoop.com for more, in addition to all the latest news and events in state and local government information technology. I'm your host, Jake Williams, StateScoop's Manager of Strategic Initiatives. This episode of Priorities is brought to you by RSA. Thanks for watching.